Can you hear me all right? Great, welcome. My name's John. I'm the director of the Signal Mountain Library. And we appreciate everyone coming out to our second annual Signal Community Reads event. This time last year, we had our first. We had so much fun, we thought we'd come back and do it again. Yes. We're very quick about this. I just want to do a couple of things and then I'll hand it over to our guest. First and foremost, I want to thank the MAC and everyone here. They do a wonderful job putting this thing on, and we certainly appreciate them. I went to elementary school in this building way back in about 1980, and we all know it's had some ups and downs since then, this building. We certainly appreciate everything that the grants have done. We're very lucky to have this facility, so thank everyone who works here at the MAC. Get a chance, either tonight or the next time you come, please visit the Shropshire Gallery and look at some of the artwork along the hallways here. Lots of stuff to look at, also things to purchase if you're so inclined. That would be a good way to support the MAC. Second of all, I'd like to thank the Friends of the Library, which is the group that organizes this as well. Everyone, of course, but most especially Deborah Blake and Beth Newell. And lastly, I just want to mention that after Kevin is done talking, there are going to be refreshments and a book signing in the event hall, which is down here what used to be the cafeteria. So please join us for that as well. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest. He's a novelist and short story writer from Sewanee, Tennessee. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Kevin Wilson.
It's nice to be here. I didn't know I was going to be in a chair. Sorry. I'm just going to get used to the surroundings for a second and get my water. It's a little napkin that has the PT Cruiser on it. And I have to get my queasy drops, which are for pregnant women and me. I eat like 20 queasy drops a day. My students are always like kind of grossed out by it. But I just want to again say how much it means to me to get to be here. And thanks so much to Deborah and Beth for all the work that went into putting this together. And I was just so grateful for the time at the library. One, just to see that beautiful library and to see the activity in it. But also to get to talk to library patrons always makes me so happy. And just a quick thing, because I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I just think you can tell a lot about a community by the way in which they support their library. That in so many ways, the most privileged people aren't necessarily using all aspects of what the library provides. But they know how important it is and all of the different things that it does for the people who utilize it. So I'm again, anytime that I can be in a library, I know I'm going to be, I'll eat fewer queasy drops than if I'm not in a library. So I think that I'm here today to talk about my most recent book, which honestly I've forgotten a lot of it at this point. I'm kind of in it when I'm writing it, and then my mind just goes blank. But I think I can remember enough to talk about it, and hopefully then have questions, and that will take the burden off of me, and maybe that will fill up some time. But I do want to talk a little bit about it, and I've written some stuff to kind of talk about this, but this is like I wrote this really fast, and it's like 12 single-space pages, so I'm not going to do this. But this book is called Run for the Hills, and it's about a young woman, Mad, who finds out in the most awkward way possible, which is this dude in a PT Cruiser drives up to her farm and says, "Hey, I'm your half-brother, and we share the same dad, and every 10 years, our dad has left a family completely changed his whole identity and started a new family. And he's been doing this for a long time. And he asks Matt to join her in the PT Cruiser and go pick up all of their half-siblings and hopefully meet and beat up their dad after they get some answers from him. And it is a kind of silly premise, but one of the things I've really been heartened by is once I started going out on tour with this book is how many people came up to me after events to say, oh yeah, my dad had 2 other families, and actually just this summer I met my half-sister that I didn't know existed until last year, and it feels like not as strange or unusual as I had thought when I started writing the book. And so I'll just say real quick, like the way the book started for me was that I always write about family. It's just that at the heart of things, I'm a domestic writer. All I really care about is just like, what does it mean to be made by people, and then what does it mean to make other people? You know, like what are our responsibilities in those? And I don't know, I've gotten 7 books out of that, so I think I can just keep doing that. You know, all I really care about in some ways is just what does it mean to make a space that holds the people that you love, and then that space can change to let people leave when they need to, and open up to let new people come in. So you can just always kind of keep writing about that space. But with this book, part of the reason that I wanted to write it was kind of based on 2 different things, was that I knew I wanted to write about what would it mean to be genetically connected to someone but never have met them before in your life, and the oddness of recognizing aspects of yourself in a person but also trying to figure out where they diverge. So I just knew that was going to be my starting point, and the kind of 2 familial stories for me that I kind of drew on was that my own mom, her mom was Japanese and met a guy, an American in the Navy. They married in Japan, had a kid, and moved to Louisiana, which is where he lived, and they had 2 more kids, my mom included. And then he started at divinity school at Vanderbilt, and while he was there, he just quit and left and headed out for parts unknown, and left my grandmother, who didn't speak English, with 3 kids in pretty bad poverty and pretty unpleasant circumstances. And he ended up moving to Houston and having a new family and having more kids, and then left that family and had another family with additional children. And one of the things, my mom eventually reconciled with him and ended up being the one to take care of him when he was dying. He moved back to Tennessee and lived with her. And I just kept trying to think of the strangeness of that, of this person who made you but also left you, and then all these people that you kind of hated until he left them too. And then my wife is adopted, and she did a DNA test just to look at genetic markers for illness. She's never been interested in meeting her birth mother. That's not anything she really cares about. And so after she did that test, she said, I'm getting all these messages from Ancestry.com, like people are writing me, and I don't want to do that. And I said, oh, can I do it? And she said, yeah. So I was pretending to be her. And I didn't ever reach out to anyone, but I just tried to answer emails that people messaged. And there were 3 distinct emails of people who were like a first cousin or a second cousin. And they said, hey, I'm so-and-so of this parent. How are we related? I'm trying to figure out this family tree. And I would write and say, hey, I'm Leanne, and I don't know because I was adopted. Do you know? And all 3 times, I never heard from that person again. And I instantly stopped using the service because I felt so terrible, because I was like, oh man, in this moment, I think this person has just realized that somebody they loved had a kid and never told me. And I just thought, oh, why did I, that weirdness of just realizing that your family is expanded. You have this person that you're related to, and then instantly closing that off. Like because the thought of opening up the space to include that person might hurt people that you actually know. And with those two stories that have kind of always been in my life, I just thought, I'm gonna write this book. I'm gonna write this book about these kids going to look for their dad. And so the thing I kind of want to use this as a springboard to talk about a little bit is that for me, and everybody, I sometimes feel like the most interesting thing in the world to me is process. Like, I love hearing about how like chefs like develop their own like style. You know, I love to hear about how they were shaped by their circumstances. I love hearing that with writers, but also really with visual artists. I love it with like rap producers. I love to hear about like how they make the thing that they make. To me, that's just endlessly fascinating. I recognize that it's not fascinating to most people. So I'll try to be like kind of brief about this, but I just always like to know, like, how do you make the thing that you make? Like, what are the things that go into you creating something? And so for me, the way that I almost always start is trying to create constraints. And that I try to limit myself as much as possible, and to try to restrict myself as much as possible. And my hope is that if I do that, then I can figure out a way around those things and tell the story that I want to tell. So I'm going to just really quickly kind of talk about this a little bit, but I always start with the lack, like in my writing and in my life, and this is partly because I grew up in Tennessee, in Winchester, Tennessee in the 90s, and there was just very little access to the things that I cared about. There just wasn't an abundance of opportunity or possibility for me, and I usually just started, almost my entire life was starting with the acceptance of that reality. Like, it's just, if you don't have a lot that you really want, it's hard to pretend otherwise, and you start to realize that if you want to make something, you're going to have to work with what's available to you. And so if there wasn't a story that I wanted to read, I was going to have to make it up. And I just did not know enough about the world. I just knew this little space of Tennessee that I occupied. And so I just worked within those limits, both as a person, like living in that space, but also as an artist. Just little by little, I tested the boundaries of where my life would touch up against the life that I kind of wanted to have. And so I just started with those two things. What do you want? What is your desire? And what's the constraint? So, you know, it's just, those are the two things I'm always working on, is what do I want and what's keeping me from having it. Like, a character, me, wants something, that's the desire, but there's something about their circumstances, like how old you are, your ability, how much money you have, that makes that desire feel impossible, and that's the constraint. And once I acknowledged those constraints, what was really cool for me was that if I could use stories as a map for escape, if I worked on the story long enough, I could write my way, even with all those constraints holding the character in place, I could write myself to an ending that moved me just a little bit beyond the limits of my actual life, that it could help me imagine how to move forward. But I always needed that constraint, and I looked for it. And I think part of that is that I've lived like my entire life with anxiety, and I was diagnosed as an adult with Tourette's. And as a kid, they thought it was OCD or just generalized anxiety. But this was the way that my brain worked, was that anytime I walked into any single situation, the immediate thing for me was to figure out, like, what is gonna kill me? Do you know what I mean? I instantly would try to recognize, like, this is not good, this is not good, there are this many people, there are not enough seats, there is only one exit and it is right next to where the people are performing. I just constantly, my whole life was just regulated, like, on what am I gonna do if this goes wrong, how am I gonna get out of it, and how will I navigate this without looking like I'm a deeply insane person. And it's not good for your living, right? Like, I sang this at the Southern Festival of Blues, because in Run for the Hills, a character, to escape, kicks out the screen of a window and tries to climb out the window to escape their fate. And I was like, I have kicked out so many screens of windows and climbed out of them to escape situations that felt untenable to me. And realizing, like, I've locked the bathroom door and then opened the window and climbed out and left. And now no one can get in that room. I don't know why, but So I just am always trying to figure out, like, how am I going to get out of this? And if I know enough, like, okay, if I need to, I'll do this. And there's a seat here that I can sit in. And there are these people that I know. What I started to learn was, like, I can leave if I need to. I know my escape plan, but I also know how I can live within these constraints. Like, if I can just talk to this person about this subject, that will give me 5 minutes. And if I do this, and then I go get something to eat, then I can keep staying alive, right? And little by little, I could figure out how to exist in almost any situation, even though I was kind of terrified at all times. And that kind of translated to my art, that the making of the thing always feels like, is this going to be good? Is anyone going to like this? Am I just kind of fooling myself that this is a story that matters? And within that terror, the thing that I always tried to do was to establish, well, here are the constraints then. Can you make this thing that you love with the constraints? And so, for this book, for instance, I just need to know what the difficulties are before I start. And I just know that even though my brain is often trying to kill me, I also know that my brain, if I trust in it, will help me figure out how to navigate those circumstances so that I can stay in this world. And so with Run for the Hills, like, immediately, I knew I'm gonna have multiple characters, and it's a road trip novel. They've gotta go find their dad, and they've gotta pick up their half-siblings. And this was kind of instantly terrifying to me. Because I have, almost every book I've ever written is set in a fictional but real town called Coalfield, Tennessee. And there is a real Coalfield, Tennessee in East Tennessee. I didn't quite understand that back in college when I made every story set in Coalfield. It was just Winchester. So every story I've ever written is in this singular place, which drives my copy editor at Echo really nuts, because he's always like, so Coalfield is a real place, and it's not geographically where you're saying it is. And I'm like, correct. And it's like, why are we doing this? What are you doing? But so every book I've ever written has been set in Coalfield, Tennessee, and I don't really like my characters to ever move or go anywhere. And if I can do it right, my characters don't. So like in Nothing to See Here, which was a book I wrote about these kids that spontaneously combust, my whole thing about that was like, where could they never leave? I was like, I'll just put them on this estate in Franklin, and they gotta stay in the guest house. And only rarely will they ever drive like in a 10-mile radius. And I'm like, this is lovely. I don't want them to go do anything, you know? I just wanna keep them so I can figure out what to do. And so for this book, I was like, you can't realize that your dad had all these other kids and they all live on the same street, right? Like I was like, if it could all be in Coalfield, like how big is Coalfield? Could they just like drive in a cul-de-sac? And I was like, no. So I knew the immediate constraint for me was, it's gotta move. You've gotta go to these places, and you've gotta leave that place that you know. And so I knew that my main character, Mad, who works on a farm in Tennessee in Coalfield, which is really Winchester, I knew that she was going to be conveyed to all these places that were unknown to her, and she was going to find her dad. And I didn't know how I was going to do this, and I got really worried. I just said, I don't know if I can make this story happen. And instantly I thought, okay, you don't like people to leave spaces. What can you do? And I just thought, okay, they're going to move, but I'm going to put them in a car. And I knew that, okay, the car is my fixed place, that every time the kid gets in, they've picked up another half-sibling, so that place is going to get tighter and tighter, and I'll get that little constrained space that I love so much. And I just said, well, what's a weird car that will convey these characters? And I thought, again, I was just like, a PT Cruiser, and I was like, that'll be my constraint, like put them in this weird, ugly, futuristic failure of a car. And I just, again, like, it just settled me. I was like, you can put them in that car, everyone will feel weird inside that car, and you can move. And I just knew once I had that, I could calm down a little bit. And each time I moved my characters, I had to just remember that, like, oh, I do know, even though I don't know what it's like to go to this place and meet a sibling you've never known before, I do know the constraint of walking into a situation and meeting someone and having to figure out how to make yourself known to them in a way that they can see you. And so I just said, okay, that will be the constraint. Every time they've got to convince this half-sibling to get in the PT Cruiser with them and go. How can you convince somebody to get in a car with you that they've never met and drive? And again, just little by little, I kept setting those constraints up for me. And I tried to figure out, like, they can't be driving forever, right? So I was like, you get like 2 weeks, that's good, okay. And that's my constraint. And I was like, they're gonna stop in 3 places. Can you think of 3 places in America? And I was like, that's hard, but I can do it. Oklahoma, Utah, California. In my brain, once I could kind of figure out those are the 3 places, I could calm down. And by the end of the story, the relief that Mag feels that she's traveled so far from home, she's met all of these people, she's had this transformative experience. I mean, I hate to say it because it feels so hokey, but like when I was writing the book, that was the same experience that I was trying to have, was can I make myself get in the car with these characters and go to these new places and try to find something true, like something transformative. And I think I did for me. And so again, out of that constraint, I found like that I could just push on the boundaries of what I thought was possible for me, and then that would give me the confidence next time to do it. And I do want to then really quickly open this up to a larger thing, which is just like, I do advise my students, and y'all are not my students, and I don't pretend that y'all are, I'm not teaching you anything, but with my students a lot of times, we read stories where we think about constraint, like Frankie in The Member of the Wedding like wants to be an adult and live somewhere far from her hometown of Georgia. And I'm like, why can't she? And they're like, because she's a kid. And it's like, yes, that's the constraint. But can you understand if you felt like you were destined for something greater, but you're a child and everyone treats you like a child, that maybe it might make you bold and maybe mean a little bit as you tried to test the boundaries of creating an identity that wasn't just that you're the daughter of these people? And they're like, yes, I can understand her. I can understand to want something so bad and your tiny little town can't see you as anything other than this. And what we talk about so much in class is, well then can you think about that in the real world? Can you think about any situation that you walk into? Can you imagine the constraints that other people are living under that might allow you some matter of grace to interact with them? And we think about this in the class, like if I were to teach a student whose English is their second language, like this is just a constraint we have to accept, right? And to my mind, the most lovely thing about it is to immediately address the constraint. Like, you don't speak the language that I speak, and yet we're gonna communicate. And we have to acknowledge that constraint, and then what we have to do is offer each other grace to understand that we are both going to try to communicate something, and it may not be exact, but if you give me the grace to try to fumble my way towards understanding, and I give you the grace to do that, then I think we actually can figure out what it is that we need. And in that same way, when COVID happened, and I was teaching my students, and we were all wearing masks, and I was like, well, I was like, can you understand that this is a constraint? Like, how is this making your life difficult? But also just the simple thing of like, we can talk, but we can't see the lower part of our face, so you just have to acknowledge that like, there is gonna be a limit to the way that we can express ourselves in this moment, but can we also just admit that maybe that's not as important as like trying to share space with each other in this moment and communicate these like difficult things. And once we acknowledge that constraint and determine that we would give each other grace, we could move forward. And there's this movie, this is the last thing I'll say and then I'll go over to questions, but I kind of loved it, which was a Danish filmmaker named Lars von Trier had this documentary called The 5 Obstructions. He took this Danish filmmaker, Jørgen Leith, and he said, Jørgen Leith, back in the 60s, made a perfect short film, and it is the most perfect film I've ever seen. And I hate this so much, because it is so hard to make stuff, and I fail all the time. And so he got Jørgen Leith, and he said, you're gonna make this movie 5 different times, and each time I'm gonna give you an obstruction, and it is gonna absolutely ruin you, and you'll know what it's like to fail finally. And so Lars von Trier was like, you gotta remake the film, but each frame can only be half a second long. And Jørgen Leith was like, that sounds terrible. That will ruin me. And Lars von Trier was like, yeah, it will be a very bad movie if you have to do this. And Jorgen, like, for like a day, just sits down and is like, how would I do that? I could do, then if I do that, that's like the stuttering of the film's like a dance. I'll make it a dance. And he made the film, and it was really beautiful. And it wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful. And Lars von Trier got so angry. And then he was like, now you gotta make one, but it's animated. And Jorgen Leith was like, oh dear, I don't know how to do animation. And then he made a really beautiful movie that was animated. And each time he's like, you gotta go to the worst place in the world and film it. And Jorgen Leith was like, okay. And he did it. And 5 straight times, Jorgen Leith, because he accepted the constraint, and because he then allowed that to be the conceit that helped him think about, how can I make the thing I want to make with this constraint? It was beautiful. And I think about this guy all the time, and I feel like Lars von Trier all the time. Like, oh, I fail all the time. But the thing that was so beautiful about that movie for me was like, all of us can consider, acknowledge the constraint, and then still figure out how we're going to make the beautiful thing that we want to make. And it's the kind of conceit by which I try to live my life, which is that I'm going to acknowledge and accept the constraint, and I know that it could ruin me, but if I just try hard enough and I give myself enough grace, maybe just by happenstance and relying on what I know I can do, something beautiful might happen. So that's all I wanted to say. So now I'm happy to take questions. I just said this at the library thing. I know we have 25 minutes maybe, more than that, but I'm happy to answer questions, but if there are no questions, it's like the most wildly awkward silence that you can imagine. And then I have to go back and read this 12-page thing to fill the time. So I'm happy to talk about the book. I'm happy to talk about writing in general. I'm happy to talk about, that's it, actually, those 2 things, the book or writing in general. But if anyone has questions, I'm happy to talk about it. And this is where the saving grace comes in, that somebody has to say something. And if not, I have 12 pages. Oh my God, yes, all right.
Okay, I don't want to spoil the book before I read it, but...
I think you can, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
The youngest sibling,
Yes.
I'm curious what led you to make him not actually
Mhm.
the biological child.
Sorry if it spoils it for you. So I will just say, like, I don't think a book can be spoiled. I don't think a movie can be spoiled. Those things, even if I know it, once I give myself over to it, I just kind of love that moment. Sorry for people that don't feel that way. I always, and like also my son's really into horror movies, and I can't watch them, but sometimes he'll be like, I think you could watch this one. So then I read the Wikipedia entry to know the exact thing, and I will just say, it's still terribly disturbing, even when I know, like it still affects me. But I just wanted, so one of the things that I just wanted to think about was like, yeah, all these people are bound by genetics, and just the way that I think about family is like, genetics are just as random as the wild ways in which people come into our lives, right? And so I just wanted to give space to the possibility that like, even if you're not made of the same genetic material of these people, you can still be connected to them, that you are still their sibling in some way. I think there's a lot of like thematic elements of this story, which is just like, what does it mean to accept and love people that are a part of your life that you didn't know about? And so for me, it was just opening that up so that it's not like you could only love and admit those people into your life if you were like directly related to them.
I loved that they still embraced him.
How could you not? How could you not be in a PT Cruiser with these people and not feel like, regardless of anything, we're family now? Drive cross country in a PT Cruiser, those people are your family. You're right, they are yours now. Yeah. Anything else? We have one going. I feel like an engineer. Yes? Heck no! So the question was, I could find no love for that father. I'll just say, like, this is the thing for me, is like, there's no invalid response to a book or piece of art ever. And like, I can't control any of that, right? The thing that I always think about, for me as an artist, is like, I made the thing, and I made it for me. Like, I wrote it to gain some pleasure out of the experience of it. So as long as I got what I wanted out of it, like, if the book doesn't get published, I still got something from it. It still meant something to me. And if other people hate it, that sucks, but I still got something out of it. The making of it sustained me. So I can't control it. I just people are like, I hated this person, I didn't like this person. I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. I can't control it. I will say that I hated the dad. And my whole goal was like, let's go beat up our dad. And we're gonna get there and just really mollywop this guy, right? Like, we're gonna kick him and beat him up and then drive home and feel like we did something. And he just seems like a despicable person. But I will just say, like, the closer and closer, I feel like I know I wasn't really in the car with him. I promise I'm not like that kind of an artist. But the closer and closer we got to that reckoning, the harder it was for me to hate him. As I kind of thought about these kids and the way in which they made a life for themselves without him, and even though they've been deeply hurt by him, they had made a life. And what was it gonna mean to go see this like old man and say like, you ruined my life? I couldn't hate him, because I also knew like, I was spending all my life trying to figure out of writing the book, like, why would this guy do this? And there was no reason other than just like, he was deeply unbalanced. That there was something inside of him that he believed to be broken, and he couldn't fathom staying with anyone for long enough for that to come out. It made me feel sympathy for him. It doesn't mean I like him, it just meant that I understood him and I didn't want to kill him. And that doesn't mean I had to like him, but it did mean that I could feel grace for him. And I will say, like, another book I wrote was called Nothing to See Here, again about those spontaneous kids. And there was this character in the book named Carl, who's like the assistant to the senator. And when I first started writing the book, I was like, I just need a square who is like boring and is gonna fight with my main character, who is cool. And Carl was just somebody to be kind of dopey and be like not nice. And the longer I wrote that book, Carl could just not be that anymore. I kept trying to think about why he would be so terrified to lose this job, that he would do this stuff, and I don't know. By the time I got towards the end of that book, I was like, I kind of love Carl. I kind of get him, and I think I can give him grace, and I can find a way for him to be in the story. And it is kind of a testament to the real world, I think, a little bit, which is like, I don't like most people, but I also don't have to spend months and months thinking about them or their motivations or hearing them talk to me about their experiences. And it does make me think that maybe I would be willing to grant more grace if I was more willing to spend time thinking about the circumstances that made that person. And again, it doesn't mean that I like them. It doesn't mean that I think Carl is some great guy. It just meant that I could understand it a little more clearly, and that gave me a little space to move. But yeah, the dad's not a good dude. Yes?
In the Nothing to See Here, why did they catch on fire? What made you decide that's what's going to happen?
Yeah, so spoiler alert, there's this book that, Nothing to See Here, that has these two kids that when they get agitated, they burst into flames, but they don't get hurt. And their hair is fine. Their clothes burn off, but their hair is fine. Those were the constraints. Like, the rules for me was like, how do I explain this magic to the reader and as quickly as possible? And it was, they catch on fire, they don't get hurt, their hair is fine, their clothes burn off. And I was like, I'm not going to explain anything except that, and those are just the rules. But yeah, that book, I mean, I could just say real quick, like, people ask a lot, like, these kids that burst into flames, it's such a wild kind of premise. But I mean, part of it was like, I have Tourette's, and my son, when he was 2, started to exhibit tics, like his own tics. And we took videos and sent them to the pediatrician, and was like, what is this? And I said, is this not good? And she said, it's really early to tell, but it's possible. It's certainly possible, but it's also just really hard to say right now at this stage in his life that he has Tourette's. And I just instantly felt just the deepest sadness. I was just like, my faulty genetic material has like ruined his life. You know, like he is gonna have a harder time than he would have if anyone else was his dad. And I just felt this kind of intense sadness, and then he started to grow up, and I don't know, he doesn't have Tourette's, but he has like anxiety, and he has night terrors when he was a kid, and he would get really red, and he would wake up in the middle of the night with no idea who we were, and he was red, like hot to the touch. And so sometimes we would just put him in a cold shower, but other times we just tried to figure out how to fix him. And as that was all going on, I was like, well, I know how to take care of my, like I know how to live my life in a way, even if it's constrained, I can live it. But how do you take care of the people that you love? How do you protect them? And so I just wrote the book, and it really started with the list that Lillian makes, which is just like, how do you take care of a kid that catches on fire? You just put him in the shower, you do transcendental meditation, you use the stuntman gel, and that was really what we were doing with Griff. And so I just started writing the book, and it's just like what I was saying before, like every time I write a book, I'm also trying to pull my real self alongside that narrative to figure out how to like get somewhere. And so as I was writing the book, I was just like, Griff would not, like, it was nothing you could do to fix him. Like in that moment, you can't just be like, hey, snap out of it, you're fine, your parents are here and we love you. He was just freaking out. And there was nothing that we could do about that. And so eventually what we just decided was like, okay, well you are gonna freak out and we're not gonna fix it, but we won't leave, right? Like we will sit in the bed and you'll just know that we'll be here, right? And so if you catch on fire, I'll catch on fire. And so I just started writing the book where Lillian is the person that just determines that the way she's gonna take care of the kids is not to be afraid of them bursting into flames, but to make a space where they know that if they burst into flames, we'll still be here. Like nothing will change. And I just wrote it, and then my son is so lovely, he's 17 and looking at colleges, and it's how wildly selfish and self-aggrandizing to think that I could have somehow made him, you know, individually his own person. It was just such a dumb thing to think. He's so wildly different from me. But again, I didn't know that when I wrote the book. So I wrote the book to figure out how to do that. And so those kids burst into flames because that's what it always felt like with our children. You love someone and you also know that inside of them is something slightly unknowable and you know you can't protect them from it, but you can live with it. You can figure out how to help them live with it. Yeah.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, yes.
I'm not between you and the door.
Okay, well, I mean, everyone over here is, but I also don't know if this is real or a wall.
You're safe.
Okay.
Looking from the outside, not knowing how you came to be the sort of writer that you are, something you'd say you have an incredible narrative ingenuity, and I think you sort of explained with constraints and how that came to be. It also seems like you have tremendous ability to write dialogue. Did you know that right from the get-go, and you sort of built around that, or did you build toward that, or how'd you learn to do that?
That's really kind that you think that. I don't know if it's true or not, but I will just say, this is not, I feel like I'm trying to give life lessons. I'm not. All I know how to talk about is how I make the stuff that I make. And so much of writing is not really what you can do, it's just what you can't do or what you're not good at. And you just always are trying to figure out, if I can't do this well, then what's my end around to still make the thing that I want to make? And so, I'm not a lyrical writer at all. I don't have any poetic sense of line. And it's really hard for me to write serious, about big topic things. I just feel so ill-equipped and unprepared to talk about it. And so I know that I have these limits, and there's many others, things that I'm not good at doing. And so much of what I'm maybe good at doing is just that you develop the things that let you get around that. So like if I'm not good at being super serious, well then I'll start light and weird, and if I can get weirdness in, then I know eventually I can pull it towards something more serious. Like I can let that emotional weight take over, but I have to start with lightness. That's just the way that I work with silliness. And I rely on dialogue a lot because I can get musicality with my characters because they're idiosyncratic kind of weirdos. So if I can let them talk, it's a little bit better than letting my authorial voice, which is not poetic or lyrical at all. So now I get this weird, janky kind of rhythm because those characters talk. So I do a lot of dialogue to obscure the fact that I can't do this stuff. And eventually you just start to get so good at the things you've done to get around the stuff that you can't do that you don't worry about it as much. That becomes the stuff you're good at. And not to be like, but I love basketball so much. And my youngest son plays it just all the time, and it's like, the players that you see in the NBA are generally not, they're so much the product of what they can't do that they've built these otherworldly techniques. So like Steph Curry is not like super tall, he's super wispy, like he would get knocked around. So what he developed was just like a wildly quick release and incredible accuracy, but he also just runs nonstop to get off a screen so that he can get that little window of a shot. He's not, in just regular terms, there's just a ton of stuff you couldn't ask him to do, but and Jokic is the same way. He like plays like your uncle in flip-flops. He's super slow, but he has unbelievable court vision. So because he has unbelievable court vision, you can't play so close on him. So now you give him just a little bit of space in case he whips this insane pass, and he is fast enough to, if you give him that much space, use that big body to get inside, and he has a soft touch. I just love that, but when I watch those guys do it, I'm like, that is otherworldly, but it's also because of the limitations of what they've accepted.
It's not mine to say that if you ever write a future book and it's called Your Uncle in Flip-Flops.
I don't think I've said that. I mean, that's just kind of a known thing people say, is that Jokic plays like your uncle at a barbecue playing in flip-flops. But that's, to me, like, that's what my style became, was an assertion of what I could do to get around the stuff I couldn't. And then it just becomes you. Yeah, in the back.
Were you able to share your story with your mother running for the hills?
Yeah, so my mom is very worried to read anything that I write, because she just doesn't want my sadness maybe on display, or she doesn't want to feel like other people might not understand the stuff that I make. But she told me this one was her favorite, and part of it was, I know that she said, the kind of, there were a lot of similar feelings that she had experienced, but the weirdest thing that she told me was like, her and her mom, it was just such a difficult life. Like they just were, it was very hard scrabble and not easy and not pleasant. And she said, but at the end of her life, one of the things I recognized was that I just loved her so much because she never left. Like she was the one who shaped and made me. And whatever I think of my dad, he was gone. Like whatever he did to me was done by absence. And it was one of those moments where she liked how the characters in the book keep talking about how their own mothers were really the ones that held on to them and shaped them and made them like dig into the person that they would be. And it's not about the dad. You want to go find the dad and tell him what he's done to you, but you go back to the people that held on to you. And so I think that was the one resonant thing for her that made her like the book a little bit. And yes, right here.
But you did write about big, hard things. I read it twice.
Oh, wow. That's more than my mom.
And the second time I kept highlighting things, like she's putting sandwiches, this grilled cheese on the plate, and you turn to her thoughts. She felt so embarrassed how badly she wanted him to know that she was okay. She's got this big, you touched her big feelings.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. And that is my way into everything is you start silly. You start with a PT Cruiser that shows up, and I'm your half-brother, and let's go beat up Dad. And all this wacky stuff happens, and just generally, if I can start light, you just if you can just turn the degrees down a little bit, you realize like, oh, this is sad. You know, there's this sad moment, but because I start light and I turn it down to sadness, what I can then do is go, but look, we can pull that back up. You know, like I have an easier time pulling out of the depths, I think, because of the way that I operate. So I'm okay with sadness and okay with those deep, bad feelings because I know that I've already lowered and gone, and I can get it back up. And it makes me a little less fearful of falling so deeply into that sadness that there's no way out of it. So I appreciate it, but it's always, for me, just little,
Yeah, that's
and until I've kind of touched up against something that would have been hard if I'd started that way. I know, oh yeah, in the back, sorry.
I'm probably about to embarrass myself greatly here, but I've read 4 of your books, and this summer, anyway, I noticed you mentioned Pop-Tarts a lot.
Mhm.
And so I remember as a child, like getting a kosher strudel was very exciting. Because you know you had the icing and you guys squirted on there, and it was a very special breakfast. Do you like Pop-Tarts?
Oh man, how much time do we have? 6 minutes. No, so if you've read a lot, like I have Pop-Tarts in almost every book. It's just like the most comforting food for me. It is like kind of, when I look back on like those, I don't mean this in a picture, but like my dirtbag years, like I was just this little kid in the middle of nowhere, and I was just kind of a weird kid, and the eating of a Pop-Tart, this is just so weird, I don't know if I want to get into this, but eating that Pop-Tart made me feel like this was some wildly imagined thing that made me feel cool that I was eating it. Like much more than like now all the rich cultural heritage of food in the South. I just wanted to eat that Pop-Tart and feel like I was connected to the larger world in some way. You know, I'd see it on TV and they were radical colors, and it just made me feel like the height of happiness was to eat that kind of Technicolor pastry. And I would eat 2 a day, and then after we had kids, the kids are not allowed to eat them. They could have the healthy ones without frosting that are made by like at Whole Foods. So I had to have all of my boxes of Pop-Tarts at my office. So all of my colleagues at Swanee are like, "You're always eating Pop-Tarts." Because whenever they walk in my office, I'm eating one. It's just my favorite food in the world. It's like, and so you just write what you know. And so my characters all really think Pop-Tarts are great. And so you saw the recurring little thing. I think I have like 2 minutes, right? We're done. So there was one more.
It's kind of a follow-up to the question about
Pop-Tarts?
I was just curious if you talked to your mom to inform your writing, or anyone who experienced abandonment in some similar way, or if you just kind of wanted to rely on your own imagining of it and your own experience. I was curious about that.
Yeah, so one of the things I just try not to do is ever talk to anybody about anything when I'm making it. Partly it's just like, I just don't want them to feel like they're providing me with the material, you know, and I'll tell them like, hey, I'm writing this book. But a lot of it too is like, the only thing I can try to figure out when you write, and one of the gifts of it, is that you try to take what is inside of you, the emotions that you know that you have, and you try to shift and bend them slightly so that they make sense for this other character. And that in some ways is the hardest work, and what I'm really trying hard to do. So I don't necessarily want like my mom or Leanne to tell me explicitly like this is what it feels like in that moment. I just want to see if I can get close to it. And I'll end just on this, which is just to say like, so much of writing for me is that grasping towards that. I know that the reader has not had the same experiences as me, and I know that they will bring different things to it. And one of the things when I write those stories is what I'm trying to get at is, this is what it feels like to me. Does it feel like that sometimes to you? And it almost is like every time I write, it's like sending a signal out into the world. And I don't know who will ever hear it, but when the signal reaches the receiver and someone says, I do know what that feels like. And I can't quite put that into words, but I can. And then that's what happened to me when I read. And this is the last thing I'll say real quick was, So the reason that I became a writer was when I was in high school, we had to do an egg drop where you take an egg and you have to build a contraption that lets it fall without breaking. And I was such a bad student, like just anxious all the time. And my dad said he would help me. And he said, let's build this. And they were going to drop it at Franklin County. One of our teachers had a helicopter. So it was going to be dropped from the helicopter onto the floor. So my dad said, let's do this. And he said, I'll help you. I promise we can do this. And he said, what's the safest thing in the world? And I said, I don't know. And he said, a baby in the womb, which is the least safe thing. I don't know why he said that. But he's like, a baby in the womb. And I was like, great. He's like, so we're going to put the egg inside a water balloon and put that in a box with all these other water balloons. And like that amniotic fluid, it will jar it, but the baby will be safe. And so we made it, and it weighed like 50 pounds, and we dropped it off of the second story of our house, and somehow it did not break. I don't know how, but the egg was fine. And my whole life changed because of this. If it had shattered, we would have. So the next day I bring it, and it is already, the box is so down, because some of the balloons are like slowly leaking, and it's just so heavy. And I look at everyone else's, and they are like made of like little triangles of paper. Like they're so, to get wind resistance. So we all have to, everyone, we have to go out to the football field on the stands, and the helicopter has them, and they're gonna drop them, and then we'll go find them. So they drop, and you just see them, and they're really beautiful, like this. They're all falling. And then mine falls, and it is like a safe that has been pushed out of it. It falls so fast with such speed, and it just explodes. And everyone at the school is like, oh my God, they're screaming. And everyone's like, whose was that? Whose was that? And I was like, who can tell? Who would know? There's so many. You know, like, things were still falling from like 10 minutes earlier, and mine was, so then, we all have to go find our egg. So I go, and I know, and I find like, there's pieces of the box, and there is little pieces of plastic. There's no egg, there's no shell, there's no yolk. It's like evaporated. And I take like the pieces of the box to the science teacher, and I show her, and she's like, that was never gonna work. And I felt this like, and again, I was just like, so I'm standing on this football field, everyone around me, and I'm just like, why am I so stupid? Like, why can I not do things the way other people can? Like, why am I not, like, thoughtful? And I just felt so weirdly alone in that moment. And I remember I went home, and my dad was like, how did it go? And I said, great. I was like, perfect. And the thing was that what I realized was once I told that story, I was like, if I had told my dad that story, then I think it would have been a moment where I was like, I know that do you know what I felt like in that moment? Like, you've never had that moment. You didn't have to be there. But can you understand, like, why I feel so bad about myself? And he could have said, yes, I do. I think I know what you mean. And so I just told myself, when I got to college, I was like, I'm always going to tell those stories because I just want to know if somebody else knows what that feels like. It can't be articulated except in the way that you tell a story. And that feeling is so hard to describe that I can only do it in telling fiction. Thanks so much, y'all.